Relax with stories that help you sleep, work, and calm your mind. Today's story is called My Best Friend's Lover. We invite you to listen and support our channel by clicking subscribe and receiving channel notifications to conveniently follow the next videos. Sincerely thank you. The air in San Jose carried the faint hum of late summer, a warmth that clung to the skin like a whispered promise. Nathan Tran stood in the corner of Liam Chen's loft apartment, a glass of red wine cradled in his hand, the stem cool against his calloused programmer's fingers. At 29, Nathan was the kind of man who blended into a room unassuming, with a quiet intensity that only surfaced when you caught his eyes. Those eyes, a deep brown framed by lashes too long for a man, held a sincerity that made people trust him instantly. His frame was lean but solid, the kind earned from morning runs through the hills rather than gym mirrors. His dark hair, slightly tousled, fell just above his brow, and tonight, in a fitted navy button-down and jeans, he looked effortlessly good, though he'd never admit it. The loft buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the low thrum of a playlist Liam had curated to scream, "I'm cool but not trying too hard." It was Liam's 30th birthday, and the room was packed with friends from their Stanford days, colleagues, and a few strangers who'd wandered in with plus ones. Nathan preferred the edges of these gatherings, observing, sipping his wine, letting the chaos unfold without pulling him in. He was the good guy, as his friends called him. No drama, no complications, just Nathan, steady as a heartbeat. Then the door swung open, and the room seemed to pause, as if the world had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. Mia Harper stepped inside, and Nathan's grip on his glass tightened, the wine nearly sloshing over the rim. She was a vision, the kind that made you question whether you'd been living in monochrome until that moment. Mia was 26, with a presence that commanded every molecule in the room. Her hair, a cascade of chestnut waves, tumbled past her shoulders, catching the dim light like polished silk. Each strand seemed to move with a life of its own, framing a face that was both delicate and fierce. Her skin was a warm ivory, kissed by a faint flush that suggested she'd just come from somewhere, exciting a late-night drive perhaps, or a dance floor that still echoed in her pulse. Her eyes were her weapon, almond-shaped, a molten hazel that flickered with gold under the loft's Edison bulbs, like embers waiting to ignite. When they swept the room, they didn't just see, they consumed. Her body was a study in contrasts, soft curves meeting sharp angles in a way that felt like a dare. She wore a black slip dress, simple yet devastating, the fabric clinging to her like a lover's hands. It skimmed the swell of her hips, dipped low enough to hint at the gentle rise of her chest, and ended mid-thigh, revealing legs that were long, toned, and made for striding into rooms and breaking hearts. Her collarbone, exposed by the dress's thin straps, was a delicate ridge that begged to be traced, and her arms, slender but strong, moved with a grace that was almost predatory. A single silver bracelet glinted on her wrist, catching the light as she gestured, and her nails, painted a deep burgundy, flashed like tiny warnings. She laughed as Liam greeted her with a bear hug, her voice a low, smoky melody that cut through the noise. Nathan's breath hitched. He didn't know who she was, but he knew she was trouble, the kind of trouble that made you want to burn your life down, just to feel the heat. "Nathan, man, come here," Liam's voice boomed, snapping Nathan out of his trance. Liam was the opposite of Nathan, in every way. Broad, shouldered, with a grin that could charm a snake, and a charisma that filled rooms like oxygen. At 30, he wore his confidence like a second skin, his dark eyes sparkling with mischief. His hair, cropped short, was perpetually mussed, and tonight, in a white linen shirt rolled to the elbows and tailored chinos, he looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne ad. Liam was the guy who made every party better, but also the one who'd forget your birthday until the last minute. Nathan crossed the room, his heart thudding in a way that felt both foreign and dangerous. Mia turned, and their eyes locked. The world narrowed to that single point of contact, her gaze pinning him like a butterfly to a board. Her lips, full and painted a soft rose, curved into a smile that was equal parts invitation and challenge. Nathan felt the air shift, heavy, with something unspoken, something that shouldn't exist in a room full of people. "Mia, this is Nathan, my brother from another mother," Liam said, clapping Nathan's shoulder. "Nathan, Mia, she's Mia." He laughed, oblivious to the current crackling between them. Mia extended her hand, and Nathan took it, his fingers brushing against hers. Her skin was warm, impossibly soft, and the contact sent a jolt through him like touching a live wire. Her grip was firm, her fingers slender but strong, and for a moment he imagined those hands elsewhere on his face, his chest, tangled in his hair. He shook the thought away, but her eyes, still locked on his, seemed to know exactly what he'd been thinking. "Nice to meet you, Nathan," she said, her voice wrapping around his name like velvet. The way she said it, slow and deliberate, made it feel like a secret only they shared. Her lips twitched, that half smile promising things he didn't dare name. "Likewise," he managed, his voice steadier than he felt. He released her hand, but the warmth of her touch lingered, a phantom sensation that refused to fade. She tilted her head, studying him, and he swore he saw a flicker of amusement in her eyes, as if she'd already mapped out his defenses and found them wanting. "Liam's told me about you," she said, her tone playful but laced with something deeper. "The quiet one, right? I bet there's more to you than that." Nathan's pulse quickened. He wasn't used to being seen, not like this, not by someone who looked at him like she was peeling back layers he didn't even know he had. "I'm just here for the cake," he said, deflecting with a small smile, but his voice betrayed a roughness that hadn't been there before. She laughed, a sound that was both light and dangerous, like the clink of a glass about to shatter. "We'll see about that," she said, and the words hung between them, heavy with implication. Liam, oblivious, slung an arm around Mia's shoulders, pulling her toward the bar. "Come on, let's get you a drink. Nathan, you good?" "Yeah," Nathan said, but his eyes didn't leave Mia. She glanced back as Liam led her away, and for a split second, her gaze burned into him, raw and unfiltered. It was a look that said, "You feel this too, don't you?" Asterisk. Her lips parted slightly, and then she turned away, her hair swaying like a curtain falling on a forbidden act. Nathan stood rooted to the spot, his wine forgotten, his chest tight with a longing he hadn't known he could feel. He didn't know her. She was Liam's girlfriend, for God's sake. But that look, that touch, that smile they'd already carved themselves into him, deep and irreversible. He took a sip of his wine, the taste bitter against the sweetness of her presence, still lingering in the air. Nathan Tran, the good guy, the one who never crossed lines, was already lost. And Mia Harper, with her firelit eyes and her dangerous smile, was the map he'd never meant to follow. As the party swirled around him, Nathan knew one thing with terrifying clarity. He was in trouble, the kind of trouble that started with a glance and ended with a heart in ruins. The weeks following Liam's birthday party were a slow-burning torture for Nathan Tran. San Jose, with its sun-drenched streets and tech-buzzing energy, felt like a stage set for a play he hadn't auditioned for. At 29, Nathan was used to control over his code, his routines, his emotions. But Mia Harper had slipped into his life like a glitch in a perfectly debugged program, and now every thought looped back to her. Mia, with her chestnut waves that shimmered like liquid amber under the California sun, her hazel eyes that held a wildfire's promise, and her body a symphony of curves and confidence that made Nathan's pulse stutter. He couldn't forget the way her black slip dress had hugged her at the party, the fabric tracing the gentle swell of her breasts, the dip of her waist, the flare of her hips. Her legs, long and sculpted, had moved with a dancer's grace, and her collarbone, a delicate ridge above the dress's neckline, had seemed to beckon his fingers. Even her hands, slender with those burgundy-painted nails, had left an imprint in his memory, their brief touch sparking a current he still felt. Nathan tried to bury it. He drowned himself in work, coding late into the night at his San Jose apartment, the glow of his monitors casting shadows on his lean frame. His body, honed from early morning runs through the Almaden Hills, was a testament to disciplined broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, arms corded with understated strength. His face, with its sharp jawline and deep brown eyes framed by lashes that softened his intensity, was handsome in a quiet way, the kind that grew on you until you couldn't look away. But Mia had seen him, really seen him, and that knowledge was a weight he carried everywhere. Liam, oblivious as ever, made it worse. At 30, Liam Chen was a force of nature broad-chested, with a grin that could disarm a room and dark eyes that sparkled with easy charm. His cropped hair was always artfully mussed, and his style tonight, a fitted gray t-shirt and dark jeans, screamed effortless cool. Liam was the glue of their friend group, the one who planned outings and roped everyone into his orbit, and now he was roping Nathan into outings with Mia. "Come on, man, don't be a hermit," Liam said one Friday, his voice crackling through Nathan's phone. "We're hitting up that new tapas place downtown. You, me, Mia, maybe a couple others. It'll be fun." Nathan's stomach twisted. "I've got deadlines," he lied, his fingers tightening around his coffee mug. The idea of seeing Mia again, her smile, her eyes, her everything, was a siren call he didn't trust himself to resist. "Dude, you're always working. Live a little." Liam's tone was light, but there was an edge of insistence. "Mia's been asking about you, says you're too quiet, needs to crack that shell." Nathan's heart lurched. She'd asked about him? The thought was a spark in a dry forest. "Fine," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "What time?" That night, the tapas restaurant was alive with clinking glasses, warm lighting, and the hum of conversation. Nathan arrived late, hoping to slip in unnoticed. His navy sweater clung to his shoulders, and his jeans hugged his thighs, a casual look that belied the storm inside him. He spotted Liam first, laughing at a high-top table, his arms slung around Mia's chair. Mia. She was a vision in a deep green blouse that draped over her curves like a lover's caress, the neckline plunging just enough to reveal the soft valley between her breasts. Her skirt, a fitted black number, ended above her knees, showcasing legs that seemed to stretch forever, their smooth skin catching the light. Her hair was loose, waves tumbling over one shoulder, and a single gold pendant nestled against her throat, drawing Nathan's eyes to the pulse beating there. Her lips, painted a soft coral, curved as she laughed at something Liam said, but when she glanced up and saw Nathan, her smile shifted sharper, knowing, like a secret shared across a crowded room. "Nathan, you made it," Liam called, waving him over. "Grab a seat, man." Nathan slid into the chair across from Mia, his movements careful, as if proximity to her might ignite something he couldn't control. Her eyes met his, and the air thickened, charged with an unspoken language. Those hazel depths, flecked with gold, seemed to strip him bare, seeing every thought he tried to hide. Her lashes, long and dark, fluttered slightly, and he wondered what it would feel like to brush his thumb across them. "Hey, Nathan," she said, her voice a low, smoky drawl that wrapped around his name like silk. "Thought you might bail on us." "Almost did," he admitted, his lips twitching into a half-smile. "Deadlines." She leaned forward, her elbows on the table, the motion pressing her blouse tighter against her chest. "You work too hard," she said, her tone teasing but her eyes serious. "What's the point of all that code if you don't have fun?" He swallowed, his throat dry despite the glass of sangria in front of him. "Someone's got to keep the internet running," he said, aiming for light but landing somewhere raw. Her laugh was a melody, soft and dangerous, and her foot brushed his under the table deliberate, he was sure, though her expression gave nothing away. "I bet you're good at keeping things running," she said, the words laced with a double meaning that made his pulse spike. Liam, pouring more sangria, missed it all. "Nathan's a machine," he said, grinning. "Guy's brain is like a server farm. Mia, you should see him debug codeades like watching a surgeon." Mia's eyes never left Nathan's. "I'd like to see that," she said, her voice soft but pointed, and Nathan felt the words settle in his chest, heavy and warm. The night unfolded in a haze of shared plates, laughter, and glances that lingered too long. Mia's presence was a magnet, pulling Nathan's attention even when he tried to focus elsewhere. The way she tilted her head, exposing the curve of her neck, the delicate line of her jaw, the way her fingers traced the rim of her glass, slow and deliberate, her nails glinting like tiny flames. Every move felt choreographed, a performance meant for him alone, and it was driving him insane. Later, Liam suggested a movie night at his place the following weekend. "Low-key, just us," he said, his arm around Mia's waist. "Nathan, you in?" Nathan hesitated, his eyes flicking to Mia. She was watching him, her lips parted slightly, her gaze a challenge. "Sure," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. "Sounds good." The movie night was worse. Liam's living room was dimly lit, the couch barely big enough for three. Nathan ended up next to Mia, their thighs inches apart, the heat of her body radiating through the space between them. She wore a loose white t-shirt tucked into high-waisted jeans, the fabric soft and slightly sheer, hinting at the curve of her waist and the shadow of her bra. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, a few strands framing her face, and her bare feet, nails still that deep burgundy, curled under her on the couch. She looked effortlessly gorgeous, the kind of beauty that made you ache to touch, to know, to possess. The movie a thriller Liam had picked was a blur. Nathan couldn't focus, not with Mia so close, her scent A mix of jasmine and something warmer, like sandalwood, filled his senses, dizzying him. Halfway through, her hand brushed his as she reached for the popcorn bowl between them. Her fingers lingered, the contact electric, and when he glanced at her, she was staring at the screen, but her lips twitched, a secret smile that said she knew exactly what she was doing. "Sorry," she murmured, her voice barely audible, but she didn't move her hand. Her skin was warm, her fingers soft, and for a moment, he imagined lacing his fingers with hers, pulling her closer, consequences be damned. "It's fine," he said, his voice rough, and he shifted slightly, breaking the contact. But the damage was done. His body was alive with her, every nerve attuned to her presence. When the movie ended, Liam stretched, oblivious to the undercurrent. "Good pick, right?" he said, yawning. "Mia, you staying over?" She glanced at Nathan, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. "Maybe," she said, her tone light but her gaze heavy. "Depends on how late it gets." Nathan stood, needing air, needing distance. "I should head out," he said, his voice tighter than he meant. "Early run tomorrow." Mia's eyes followed him as he grabbed his jacket. "Night, Nathan," she said, and the way she said his name, soft and lingering, was a hook in his chest. That night, he dreamed of her, her hair spilling over his pillow, her eyes burning into his, her body pressed against him, all soft curves and searing heat. He woke tangled in his sheets, his heart pounding, his skin feverish. He hated himself for it. Mia was Liam's, his best friend's girlfriend, untouchable. But the want was a living thing, clawing at him, and when his phone buzzed with a group text from Liam about another outing, he didn't say no. The encounters piled up: dinners, hikes, a karaoke night where Mia's voice, sultry and low, singing a Billie Eilish cover, made Nathan forget how to breathe. Each time, she found ways to unravel him. A glance that lingered, a laugh that felt too intimate, a brush of her arm that wasn't accidental. Her body was a language he was learning against his will, the way her hips swayed when she walked, the curve of her spine when she leaned close, the way her lips glistened after a sip of wine. She was a masterpiece, every detail crafted to torment him, and he was powerless against it. One evening, at a rooftop bar overlooking the city, she wore a red dress that clung to her like a second skin, the neckline daring, the hem high enough to make his mouth dry. She stood by the railing, the skyline framing her, and when she caught him staring, she smiled a slow, deliberate curve of her lips that said, "I see you, and I know." Her fingers toyed with her necklace, drawing his eyes to the hollow of her throat, the pulse beating there like a metronome to his desire. "You're quiet tonight," she said, stepping closer, her voice a caress. The breeze lifted a strand of her hair, and he fought the urge to tuck it behind her ear, to feel the silk of it against his skin. "Just thinking," he said, his voice low, his eyes locked on hers. Her scent enveloped him, intoxicating, and he wondered what it would be like to bury his face in her neck, to taste the salt of her skin. "About what?" she asked, tilting her head, her eyes glinting with mischief. Her lips were so close, full and inviting, and he imagined kissing her, hard and hungry, right there with the city as their witness. "Things I shouldn't," he admitted, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Her smile widened, dangerous and dazzling. "Good," she said, and turned away, leaving him breathless, the space between them crackling with what could never be. Nathan drove home that night, the city lights blurring through his windshield, his hands gripping the wheel too tight. Mia was afire, and he was kindling, waiting to burn. He didn't know how much longer he could stand in her heat without catching flame. But the worst part, he didn't want to stop. San Jose had never felt so small to Nathan Tran. Every street, every cafe, every flicker of sunlight through the eucalyptus trees seemed to carry Mia Harper's shadow. At 29, Nathan was a man of structure. His code was clean, his runs were timed, his emotions were boxed neatly away. But Mia had torn through that order like a storm, leaving him adrift in a sea of want he couldn't navigate. Her image haunted him, those hazel eyes, molten with gold, that could pin him with a glance, her chestnut hair spilling like silk over her shoulders, her body a map of curves and edges that begged to be explored. He saw her everywhere, in the curve of a wine glass, the sway of a stranger's hips, the low hum of a jazz song on his playlist. Nathan tried to outrun it. His morning jogs through the Almaden Hills grew longer, his lean frame pushing harder, muscles flexing under sweat-slick skin. His body was a quiet marvel, broad shoulders, a tapered waist, legs built for distance rather than show. His face, with its sharp jawline and deep brown eyes framed by lashes that softened his intensity, carried a sincerity that made women linger. But Mia wasn't just any woman. She was Liam's, his best friend's girlfriend, and that fact was a chain around Nathan's heart, heavy and unyielding. Liam Chen, at 30, was the sun to Nathan's moon, radiant, magnetic, oblivious. His broad chest and easy grin-filled rooms, his dark eyes sparking with a charm that disarmed everyone. His cropped hair, always a little messy, and his style today, a fitted black polo and jeans, made him look like he'd walked off a magazine cover. Liam was the glue of their friend group, the one who planned hikes, dinners, movie nights, and dragged Nathan along, unaware of the fire he was stoking. "You gotta loosen up, man," Liam would say, clapping Nathan's shoulder. "Mia thinks you're too serious. She's dying to see you smile." Mia. The mention of her name was a blade, sharp and sweet. Nathan avoided her when he could, declining Liam's invites with flimsy excuses: work, fatigue, a non-existent cold. But the pull was relentless. He'd catch himself replaying their moments, her laugh at the tapas restaurant, smoky and intimate, the brush of her foot under the table, deliberate and electric, the way her red dress had clung to her at the rooftop bar, outlining every curve, the swell of her breasts, the dip of her waist, the long toned legs that seemed to whisper his name. Her body was a language he couldn't unlearn, each detail etched into him. The delicate ridge of her collarbone, the pulse at her throat, the way her burgundy nails flashed like warnings. She was a fever, and he was burning. Then came the day Liam left for a conference in Seattle. "Just a week," he'd said, tossing a duffel bag into his car. "Keep an eye on Mia for me, yeah? She gets bored." He'd laughed, oblivious to the weight of his words. Nathan nodded, his throat tight, promising nothing. That afternoon, Liam texted, "Forgot to return Mia's scarf to her place. Can you drop it off? You're closer." Nathan stared at the message, the scarf, a soft gray cashmere thing draped over his couch like a taunt. He could have said no, could have mailed it, but the thought of seeing her alone was a drug he couldn't refuse. The drive to Mia's apartment in downtown San Jose was a blur, the scarf in his passenger seat, a silent accusation. The sky was heavy, clouds rolling in, the air thick with the promise of rain. Nathan parked outside her building, his heart hammering, his hands gripping the wheel. He was just dropping off a scarf, nothing more. But his body betrayed him, his pulse racing, his skin prickling with anticipation. He climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, the scarf soft in his hands, her scent jasmine and sandalwood still clinging to it. He knocked, and the door opened, and there she was. Mia stood in the doorway, and Nathan's breath caught, sharp and painful. She wore one of Liam's oversized white dress shirts, the sleeves rolled to her elbows, the hem grazing her thighs. The fabric was slightly sheer, hinting at the curves beneath the gentle swell of her breasts, the shadow of her navel, the flare of her hips. Her legs, bare and endless, gleamed in the dim light, their smooth skin an invitation he didn't dare accept. Her hair was a glorious mess, chestnut waves tumbling over her shoulders, a few strands clinging to her neck, where a faint sheen of sweat glistened. Her face was bare of makeup, her hazel eyes raw and luminous, flecked with gold that seemed to pulse in the half-light. Her lips, full and unpainted, parted slightly, and her cheeks held a soft flush, as if she'd just woken from a dream. "Nathan," she said, her voice a low, smoky caress that wrapped around his name like a lover's touch. "Didn't expect you." He held up the scarf, his voice rough. "Liam asked me to drop this off." Her eyes flicked to the scarf, then back to him, a slow smile curving her lips. It was a dangerous smile, the kind that promised trouble and made you want to chase it. "Come in," she said, stepping back, the motion making the shirt shift, revealing a sliver more of her thigh. "It's about to pour. You don't want to get caught in it." He shouldn't have. Every instinct screamed to hand her the scarf and leave, to run from the fire in her eyes. But his feet moved, and he was inside, the door clicking shut behind him, like a trap snapping closed. Her apartment was small but warm, a mix of eclectic charm and effortless style. A velvet couch in deep teal, a shelf of books and vinyl records, a potted fern catching the gray light from the window. The air smelled of her jasmine, sandalwood, and something sweeter, like vanilla from a candle flickering on the coffee table. Outside, thunder rumbled, and the first drops of rain pattered against the glass. "Tea?" she asked, moving to the kitchen, the shirt swaying with her steps, outlining the curve of her spine, the gentle sway of her hips. Her bare feet patted softly on the hardwood, her toes curling slightly, and Nathan's eyes lingered, imagining the feel of her skin under his hands. "Sure," he said, his voice tight, and he set the scarf on the counter, his fingers itching to touch something else, her hair, her wrist, the hem of that damn shirt. He stood by the window, needing distance, watching the rain streak the glass, but his eyes kept drifting to her. She moved with a grace that was almost unbearable, every gesture deliberate, every glance a hook. She reached for a tin of tea on a high shelf, the shirt lifting to reveal the tops of her thighs, the curve of her ass barely concealed. Nathan's mouth went dry, his hands clenching at his sides. Her body was a masterpiece, each line crafted to torment him, the arch of her back, the soft swell of her breasts pressing against the fabric, the way her hair fell like a curtain, begging to be swept aside. She turned, catching him, staring, and her smile was slow, knowing. "You're quiet today," she said, filling a kettle, her voice teasing but laced with something heavier. "Something on your mind." He swallowed, his throat tight. "Just the rain," he said, the lie clumsy, and her laugh, soft and throaty, told him she didn't buy it. The kettle whistled, and she poured the tea, her movements fluid, her fingers wrapping around the mug with a delicacy that made him ache. She handed him a cup, her fingers brushing his, the contact searing, and he nearly dropped it. Her eyes held his, unyielding, and he saw it, the same hunger he felt, mirrored in those golden-flecked depths. "Sit," she said, nodding to the couch, and he obeyed, sinking into the velvet, the mug warm in his hands. She sat across from him, one leg tucked under her, the shirt riding higher, exposing more of her thigh. The rain was louder now, a steady drum against the windows, and the lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across her face. They talked, or tried to, about the weather, Liam's trip, the book she was reading. But the words were a thin veil, the real conversation in their eyes, their pauses, the way her lips parted when she looked at him. The air was thick, heavy with what they wouldn't say, and every glance was a step closer to a line they couldn't uncross. The lights flickered again, then went out, plunging the room into a soft, stormy gray. The candle on the table glowed, its flame reflecting in her eyes, turning them into twin fires. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him, her chest rising and falling, the shirt shifting with each breath, outlining the curve of her breasts, the peak of her nipples against the fabric. "Nathan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, and it was a question, a challenge, a plea. She leaned forward, her hair spilling over one shoulder, her lips glistening in the candlelight, and he felt the world tilt, reason slipping away. He set his mug down, his hands trembling, and stood, needing to move to break the spell. "I should go," he said, but his voice was raw, unconvincing, and he didn't move toward the door. She stood, too, closing the distance between them, her bare feet silent on the floor. She was so close now, her scent enveloping him, her body a breath away. The shirt hung loose, but it couldn't hide the curve of her waist, the softness of her thighs, the pulse hammering at her throat. Her eyes searched his, raw and unguarded, and he saw it, all desire, fear, defiance. "Stay," she said, and it was a command, soft but unyielding. Her hand reached for his, her fingers warm, her grip firm, and the touch was a spark in a powder keg, just for a minute. He should have pulled away. He should have left, driven home, let the rain wash her from his skin. But her hand in his was an anchor, and he was drowning. "Mia," he said, his voice a rasp, "this is a bad idea." She stepped closer, her body brushing his, the heat of her searing through his clothes. Her lips were inches away, full and inviting, and her eyes burned into his, stripping him bare. "Maybe," she whispered, her breath warm against his chin. "But you feel it too, don't you?" He did. God, he did. It was in the way his blood roared, the way his hands ached to touch her, the way her presence filled every corner of him. She was a tide, pulling him under, and he was tired of fighting. "Tell me," she said, her voice a velvet blade, her fingers tightening around his. "What do you see when you look at me?" He stared at her, the candlelight carving her face into something almost unrealer, cheekbones high and sharp, her lips parted, her eyes a storm of gold and hazel. Her body was a siren's call, the shirt clinging to her curves, her legs bare and endless, her scent a drug in his veins. He wanted to tell her she was beautiful, but it wasn't enough. She was more dangerous, radiant, forbidden, everything he shouldn't want, and everything he couldn't let go. "Something I shouldn't," he said, the words a confession, low and broken, and her smile was a victory, small and devastating. The rain roared outside, the room dark and warm, and her hand stayed in his, her eyes locked on his, daring him to move, to speak, to break. He didn't know how long they stood there, seconds or years, but he knew one thing. This moment, this closeness, was a line they were already crossing, and the fall was only a matter of time. She released his hand, stepping back, but the space between them felt charged, alive with what hadn't happened. "You should go," she said, echoing his words, but her voice was soft, almost regretful, and her eyes didn't let him go. He nodded, grabbing the scarf, his movements jerky, and headed for the door. The rain was a cold shock as he stepped outside, but it couldn't douse the fire she'd lit. He drove home, the scarf still in his hand, her scent clinging to it, to him, and he knew he was lost. That night, he lay awake, the rain a distant echo, her face burned into his mind, her lips, her eyes, her body in that shirt, her voice asking what he saw. He saw her, all of her, and it was a truth he couldn't escape. Mia Harper was a line he shouldn't cross, but every fiber of him wanted to run toward it. Consequences be damned. The rain had stopped, but the air in San Jose hung heavy, thick with the scent of wet asphalt and unspoken sins. Nathan Tran drove through the city's neon-lit streets, his hands white-knuckled on the wheel, his heart a war drum in his chest. At 29, he was a man of logic, of lines not crossed, of loyalty to the people he loved. But Mia Harper had become a force he couldn't resist, a gravitational pull that defied every rule he'd ever set for himself. Her image was a constant torment, those hazel eyes, flecked with gold, that saw through him, her chestnut hair cascading like a river he wanted to drown in, her body a canvas of curves and strength that made his fingers ache to touch. She was Liam's girlfriend, his best friend's heart, and yet she was the pulse in Nathan's veins. The memory of their last encounter, just days ago in her apartment, was a wound that wouldn't heal. Mia in Liam's oversized shirt, the fabric clinging to her breasts, skimming her thighs, her bare legs gleaming in the candlelight. Her voice, low and daring, asking, "What do you see when you look at me?" His answer, "Something I shouldn't," had been a confession, a crack in the dam holding back his desire. Her touch, her scent, her eyes, they'd haunted him, infiltrating his dreams, his runs, his late-night coding sessions. Nathan's body, lean and strong from years of discipline, felt like a traitor, every muscle taut with a hunger he couldn't outrun. His face, with its sharp jawline and deep brown eyes framed by lashes too soft for the storm inside him, carried a quiet beauty, but it was Mia who made him feel seen, wanted, alive. Liam Chen, at 30, was the anchor of Nathan's world, broad-shouldered, with a grin that could light up a room, and dark eyes that sparkled with effortless charm. His cropped hair, perpetually mussed, and his style last seen in a tailored blazer and jeans made him the kind of man who turned heads. Liam was the brother Nathan never had, the one who'd pulled him through college heartbreaks and celebrated his quiet victories. But Liam was blind to the current crackling between Nathan and Mia, his trust in them absolute. He was still in Seattle, his conference extended by a day, and his absence was a dangerous void, a space where temptation grew unchecked. Nathan had tried to stay away. After leaving Mia's apartment, he'd thrown himself into work, his San Jose loft a fortress of monitors and coffee mugs. but her scent lingered on the scarf he hadn't returned, jasmine and sandalwood seeping into his skin. Her voice echoed in his mind, her challenge, stay a hook he couldn't unfasten. He'd avoided Liam's texts, ignored group plans, but the pull was relentless. And then, that evening, a single message from Mia undid him. I'm alone. Come over, please. He shouldn't have gone. Every fiber of him knew it, but his car was already moving, the city blurring past, his pulse a frantic rhythm. He parked outside her apartment, the same third-floor walk-up where he'd stood days ago, paralyzed by want. The sky was clear now, stars piercing the dark, but inside him, a storm raged. He climbed the stairs, his breath shallow, his hands trembling. He knocked, and the door opened, and there she was. Mia stood before him, and Nathan's world narrowed to her. She wore a black silk camisole, the straps thin as whispers, the fabric molding to her body like a second skin. It dipped low, revealing the soft curve of her breasts, the faint shadow of her cleavage, and ended at her hips, where matching black shorts hugged her thighs. Her legs, long and toned, shimmered in the soft light of her apartment, their smooth skin a siren's call. Her hair was loose, chestnut waves tumbling past her shoulders, catching the glow of a single lamp, each strand a thread he wanted to tangle in his fingers. Her face was bare, her hazel eyes raw and luminous, gold flecks dancing like embers. Her lips, full and unpainted, parted slightly, and a faint flush warmed her cheeks, as if her body already knew what her mind hadn't admitted. Nathan, she said, her voice a velvet blade, low and trembling, and the way she said his name was a spark in a dry forest. She stepped back, inviting him in, and he crossed the threshold, the door closing with a soft click that felt like fate sealing shut. Her apartment was warm, the air heavy with her scent jasmine, sandalwood, and that sweet vanilla from the candles still burning on the coffee table. The velvet couch, the bookshelves, the fern by the window, they were the same, but tonight they felt like a stage for something inevitable. She didn't speak, just watched him, her eyes stripping him bare, and he felt the weight of her gaze, heavy and hot, on his body. He wore a fitted gray t-shirt and jeans, the fabric clinging to his broad shoulders, his lean waist, his thighs. His hair, dark and slightly tousled, fell over his brow, and his eyes, deep brown and searching, locked on hers, unable to look away. You shouldn't be here, she said, but her voice was soft, almost a plea, and she didn't move away. She stood close, too close, her body radiating heat, the silk of her camisole catching the light, outlining the curve of her waist, the gentle swell of her hips. I know, he said, his voice rough, raw with the truth he couldn't hide. But you asked me to come. She swallowed, her throat moving, the pulse at her neck a metronome to his desire. I did, she admitted, and her eyes flickered with something guilt, defiance, need. I shouldn't have, but I did. He took a step closer, the space between them shrinking, the air crackling with what they both felt. Her scent enveloped him, dizzying, and he saw every detail of her, the way her lips glistened, the way her hair framed her face, the way her breasts rose with each breath pressing against the silk. She was a vision, a dream made flesh, and he was drowning in her. Mia, he said, his voice a rasp, and it was a question, a warning, a surrender. Her eyes held his, unyielding, and he saw the same storm in them: want, fear, a hunger that matched his own. She moved first, her hand reaching for his, her fingers warm and trembling. The touch was electric, a jolt that seared through him, and he didn't pull away. Her skin was soft, her grip firm, and he imagined those hands elsewhere on his face, his chest, pulling him closer. "Nathan," she whispered, her breath warm against his lips. "Tell me to stop." He couldn't. The words were there, but they were ash in his mouth. Instead, he closed the distance, his free hand finding her waist, the silk of her camisole cool under his fingers, her body warm beneath it. She gasped, a soft sound that broke him, and then her lips were on his, or his on hers, it didn't matter. The kiss was fire, fierce and desperate, a collision of need too long denied. Her mouth was soft, hot, tasting of mint and something sweeter, and he drank her in, his tongue tracing her lips, her teeth, her heat. She kissed him back, hard and hungry, her hands sliding up his chest, fingers digging into his shoulders, nails scraping through his shirt. Her body pressed against him, all curves and softness, her breasts crushing against his chest, her hips aligning with his, and he felt her everywhere, a tide pulling him under. He groaned, low and guttural, and lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist, her thighs strong and warm. The silk shorts rode up, exposing more of her skin, and he carried her to the couch, the velvet cool against his hands as he set her down. She pulled him with her, their mouths never parting, the kiss deepening, a tangle of tongues and teeth and breathless need. Her hair spilled over the cushions, a chestnut sea, and he buried his fingers in it, the strands silk against his skin. "Nathan," she gasped, breaking the kiss, her lips swollen, her eyes wild. Her hands tugged at his shirt, pulling it over his head, and her fingers traced his chest, his abs, her nails scraping lightly, leaving trails of fire. His body was a map of strength, broad shoulders, lean muscles, a faint scar on his ribs from a childhood fallen. Her touch was a cartographer, claiming every inch. He kissed her neck, her pulse hammering under his lips, and she arched, a soft moan escaping her. Her skin was salt and sweetness, and he traced her collarbone, the delicate ridge he'd dreamed of, his tongue dipping into the hollow of her throat. Her camisole slipped, one strap falling, and he kissed the curve of her shoulder, the swell of her breast, the silk barely containing her. Her hands were in his hair, pulling him closer, her legs wrapping tighter, and he felt her heat, her need, matching his own. "Only once," she whispered, her voice trembling, her lips brushing his ear. "Just this once, and I'll stop looking at you like that. I promise." He pulled back, his eyes searching hers, and he saw it guilt, desire, a plea for absolution. "Mia," he said, his voice broken, "we can't take this back." "I know," she said, and her hands framed his face, her thumbs tracing his jaw, his lips. "But I need you, just once." It was a lie, and they both knew it, but it was enough. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring her, his hand sliding under her camisole, lifting it over her head. Her skin was a revelation, warm and smooth, her breasts full and perfect, her nipples hardening under his touch. He kissed them, slow and deliberate, and she arched, her moans a symphony that drove him wild. Her shorts followed, and she was bare beneath, her body a masterpiece, long legs, toned thighs, the soft curve of her hips, the heat between them calling him. He shed his jeans, his body taut with need, and they moved together, skin to skin, on Liam's velvet couch. The betrayal was a shadow, but it couldn't dim the fire. She was everywhere, her hands on his back, her lips on his throat, her legs around him, pulling him closer. Their rhythm was frantic, then slow, then frantic again, a dance of need and guilt and ecstasy. Her eyes never left his, gold and hazel burning into him, and when she cried out, her nails digging into his shoulders, he followed, the world dissolving into her. They lay there, breathless, tangled, her hair fanned across his chest, her skin slick with sweat. The candle flickered, casting shadows on her face, her lips parted, her eyes soft but haunted. "Just once," she whispered again, but her voice was fragile, a promise already breaking. He kissed her forehead, his heart aching, and they dressed in silence, the weight of what they'd done settling like dust. She walked him to the door, her camisole back in place, but her eyes were different, Nora, vulnerable, afraid. "Nathan," she said, her voice barely audible, "I'm sorry." "Don't," he said, his throat tight. "Don't say that." He left, the night air cold against his skin, and drove home, the city a blur of lights and guilt. In his apartment, he stood under the shower, the water icy, pounding his skin, but it couldn't wash her away. Her scent, her taste, her moans, they were part of him now, a stain he couldn't erase. He sat on his couch, head in his hands, and knew one truth: there was no going back. Mia Harper was his sin, his salvation, and he was already lost in her. The days after that night were a descent into a quiet hell for Nathan Tran. San Jose, with its sun-soaked streets and tech-driven pulse, felt like a prison, every corner holding a ghost of Mia Harper. At 29, Nathan was a man built on control. His code was meticulous, his life ordered, his loyalty to friends like Liam Chen unwavering. But Mia had shattered that foundation, her presence a wildfire that left only ash in its wake. Her image was a constant ache, those hazel eyes molten with gold that pierced him, her chestnut hair, a cascade he'd tangled his fingers in, her body, a symphony of curves and strength that had burned against his. She was Liam's girlfriend, his best friend's love, and yet she was the sin Nathan couldn't wash away. The memory of their night together was a blade, sharp and unrelenting. Mia in her black silk camisole, the fabric clinging to her breasts, skimming her thighs, her bare legs wrapping around him. Her voice trembling with need, whispering, "Only once," as they surrendered on Liam's velvet couch, her skin warm and slick, her moans a melody that still echoed in his dreams. Nathan's body, lean and strong from years of running the Almaden Hills, was a traitor, every muscle remembering her touch. His face, with its sharp jawline and deep brown eyes, framed by lashes that softened his intensity, carried a quiet handsomeness, but it was Mia who'd made him feel alive, desired, undone. Liam Chen, at 30, was the brother Nathan never had, broad-chested, with a grin that could charm a storm and dark eyes that sparkled with easy warmth. His cropped hair, always a little mussed, and his style last seen in a fitted navy, sweater, and chinos made him the kind of man who owned every room. Liam was back from Seattle now, his conference over, and his presence was a weight Nathan couldn't bear. Liam's trust was absolute, his laughter oblivious, and every moment with him was a reminder of the betrayal Nathan carried like a stone in his chest. Mia's text came the morning after, A single line that seared itself into him. I don't regret it, but I'm scared. Nathan stared at the words, his coffee cold in his hand, his San Jose apartment a cage of glass and steel. Her fear mirrored his own, but her lack of regret was a spark he didn't know how to handle. He didn't respond, couldn't find words to bridge the chasm between what they'd done and what they should do next. Instead, he deleted the message, as if erasing it could erase the night, her touch, the way she looked at him as they parted, eyes raw, lips trembling, body still radiating heat. He avoided Liam, dodging calls with excuses about work, deadlines, a fictional flu. His loft became a bunker, monitors glowing late into the night, code his only refuge. But Mia was there, in every line he wrote, every shadow on the wall. Her scent, jasmine, sandalwood, vanilla lingered in his memory, as vivid as if she were standing beside him. Her body haunted him. The curve of her waist under his hands, the swell of her breasts against the silk, the long, toned legs that had locked around him. She was a fever he couldn't break, and the guilt was a chain, tightening with every breath. Liam, oblivious, wouldn't let him hide. Dude, you're ghosting me, he said one evening, his voice crackling through Nathan's phone. What's up? You okay? His tone was light, but there was a thread of concern, and it cut Nathan deeper than any accusation could. Just swamped, Nathan lied, his voice tight, his fingers gripping the edge of his desk. Big project. All right, but you're coming out tomorrow, Liam said, undeterred. Mia and I are grabbing drinks at the Continental. No excuses, man. I need my wingman. Nathan's stomach twisted, the mention of Mia a jolt to his core. I'll try, he said, but the words were hollow, and Liam's laugh told him he wasn't getting out of it. The Continental was a sleek downtown bar, all dark wood and amber lighting, the kind of place where secrets felt safe in the shadows. Nathan arrived late, hoping to slip in unnoticed, his navy button-down clinging to his shoulders, jeans hugging his thighs. His hair, dark and a little tousled, fell over his brow, and his eyes, deep brown and guarded, scanned the room. Liam was at a high-top table, his arm around Mia, his grin as bright as ever, and Miasha was a vision that stopped Nathan's heart. She wore a deep, burgundy dress, the fabric draping over her like a lover's hands, the neckline plunging to reveal the soft valley between her breasts, the hem high enough to showcase legs that gleamed in the dim light. Her hair was loose, chestnut waves tumbling over one shoulder, catching the glow of the bar's Edison bulbs. Her hazel eyes, flecked with gold, were a storm of emotions, guilt, desire, defiance, and her lips painted a soft rose, curved into a smile that was both a greeting and a challenge. Her body was a masterpiece, every curve a temptation, the gentle swell of her hips, the delicate ridge of her collarbone, the pulse at her throat that Nathan knew by heart. She was everything he wanted and everything he couldn't have, standing there in Liam's embrace. Nathan, my man, Liam called, waving him over, his arm tightening around Mia's waist. Thought you'd bail again. Nathan forced a smile, his chest tight, and slid into a chair across from them. Wouldn't miss it, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. His eyes flicked to Mia, and hers met his, a silent collision that made the air thicken. Her gaze was raw, unfiltered, and he saw it, the memory of their night, the weight of what they'd done, the pull that hadn't faded. Hey, Nathan, she said, her voice a low, smoky drawl that wrapped around his name like a caress. The way she said it, soft and deliberate, was a secret they shared, and it sent a shiver down his spine. "Hey," he managed, his throat dry, and he reached for the beer. Liam pushed toward him, needing something to anchor him. Her eyes didn't leave his, and he felt the heat of her, even across the table, the way her dress clung to her curves, the way her fingers toyed with her necklace, drawing his gaze to the hollow of her throat. Liam, oblivious, launched into a story about his conference, his hands gesturing, his laugh filling the space. Mia nodded, her smile polite, but her eyes kept finding Nathan's, each glance a spark in a powder keg. Her foot brushed his under the table, deliberate, he was sure, and he froze, his pulse spiking. Her expression gave nothing away, but her lips twitched, a secret smile that said she knew exactly what she was doing. The night was torture, a dance of stolen glances and unspoken words. Mia's presence was a magnet, pulling Nathan's attention even when he tried to focus on Liam. The way she tilted her head, exposing the curve of her neck, the delicate line of her jaw. The way her fingers traced the rim of her wine glass, slow and deliberate, her burgundy nails glinting like tiny flames. Every move was a performance, a siren's call meant for him, and it was unraveling him. Later, Liam stepped away to take a call, leaving them alone. The bar's hum faded, the world narrowing to the space between them. Mia leaned forward, her elbows on the table, the motion pressing her dress tighter against her chest. "You haven't answered my text," she said, her voice soft but pointed, her eyes searching his. Nathan swallowed, his hands clenching around his beer. "I didn't know what to say," he admitted, his voice low, raw, with the truth he couldn't hide. Her lips parted, a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "I meant it," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't regret it, but I'm scared of what it means." He stared at her, the candlelight carving her face into something almost unrealer, cheekbones high and sharp, her lips glistening, her eyes a storm of gold and hazel. Her body was a temptation, the dress clinging to her curves, her legs crossed, one bare knee brushing his under the table. "Mia," he said, his voice rough, "we can't do this again. It's not fair to Liam." Her eyes flickered, guilt flashing through them, but her jaw tightened. "I know," she said, but her voice was fragile. And her hand reached for his, her fingers brushing his knuckles, the contact searing. "But I can't stop thinking about you." The words were a blade, cutting through his resolve. He pulled his hand back, the motion jerky, and stood, needing air, needing distance. "I have to go," he said, his voice tight, and he grabbed his jacket, his movements frantic. Her eyes followed him, raw and pleading, but she didn't stop him. "Nathan," she said, her voice barely audible, "be careful." He left, the night air cold against his skin, and drove home, the city a blur of lights and guilt. In his apartment, he paced, his heart pounding, her words echoing, "I can't stop thinking about you." He wanted to hate her, to hate himself, but all he could feel was her touch, her voice, her body pressed against his. The next day, Liam called, his voice bright, oblivious. "Hey man, I need your opinion," he said, and Nathan's stomach dropped, sensing the weight behind the words. "I'm thinking of proposing to Mia soon. Like, really soon. What do you think?" The question was a punch, stealing Nathan's breath. He sank onto his couch, his hands trembling, Liam's voice a distant hum, Mia, with a ring on her finger, bound to Liam forever. The image was a vice around his heart, squeezing until he couldn't breathe. "That's Big, he managed, his voice hollow. You sure? Yeah, Liam said, his laugh warm, trusting. She's the one, you know? I can't imagine anyone else. Nathan closed his eyes, the guilt a tidal wave. Sounds like you've made up your mind, he said, and ended the call, his chest tight, his world tilting. That night, he couldn't stay away. He drove to Mia's apartment, the city dark and quiet, his heart a storm. He didn't know what he'd say, what he'd do, but he needed to see her, to confront the truth they'd created. He parked outside, staring up at her window, the light spilling out like a beacon. He didn't go in, didn't knock, just stood in the shadows, his hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the cool air. Her silhouette appeared in the window, her hair loose, her body outlined against the light. She didn't see him, but he saw her. Every curve, a memory, every movement, a pull he couldn't resist. He stood there, frozen, torn between running to her and running away, until the light went out and she was gone. He drove home, the road blurring through his tears, and knew one truth. Mia was his heart's thief, and he was hers, but the cost was a debt neither could pay. Liam's proposal loomed, a guillotine waiting to fall, and Nathan was caught in the blade's path, his conscience battling a desire that refused to die. Time had a way of slipping through Nathan Tran's fingers, like sand he couldn't hold. A year had passed since that fateful night with Mia Harper, a year that felt both endless and fleeting, etched in the quiet corners of his San Jose apartment. At 30 now, Nathan was still the man of control, his code pristine, his runs through the Almaden Hills a ritual, his loyalty to Liam Chen a tether he couldn't break. But Mia had rewritten his soul, her presence a scar that pulsed with every heartbeat. Her hazel eyes, flecked with gold, still haunted him, her chestnut hair, a cascade he'd buried his hands in, her body, a map of curves and strength that had burned against his. She was Liam's fiancée now, a truth that was both a wall and a wound, and yet she was the ghost Nathan couldn't exorcise. The memory of their night together was a flame that wouldn't die. Mia in her black silk camisole, the fabric clinging to her breasts, skimming her thighs, her legs wrapping around him as they surrendered on Liam's velvet couch. Her voice trembling with promise, whispering, only once, as their bodies became one. Her skin, warm and slick, her moans a melody that still played in his dreams. Nathan's body, lean and strong, was a canvas of memory-broad shoulders, a tapered waist, muscles that had flexed under her touch. His face, with its sharp jawline and deep brown eyes framed by lashes that softened his intensity, carried a quiet beauty. But it was Mia who'd made him feel seen, desired, broken. Liam Chen, at 31, was the sun that never dimmed broad-chested, with a grin that could charm the stars and dark eyes that sparkled with warmth. His cropped hair, always artfully mussed, and his style last seen in a tailored gray blazer and jeans made him the kind of man who owned every moment. Liam was Nathan's anchor, his best friend, the one who'd stood by him through college heartbreaks and quiet triumphs. But Liam's trust was a blade, cutting Nathan deeper with every smile, every plan, every mention of Mia. The ring on her finger, a diamond that caught the light like a warning, was Liam's claim, and Nathan was the thief who'd stolen what wasn't his. The year had been a tightrope. After that night, Nathan had tried to rebuild the walls between him and Mia. He'd avoided her, dodging Liam's invites with excuses: work, travel, A fabricated family emergency. His loft became a fortress, monitors glowing late into the night, code his only language. But Mia was there, in every line he wrote, every shadow on the wall. Her scent jasmine, sandalwood, vanilla lingered in his memory, as vivid as if she were breathing beside him. Her body haunted him, the curve of her waist under his hands, the swell of her breasts against the silk, the long, toned legs that had locked around him. She was a fever he couldn't shake, and the guilt was a chain, tightening with every lie he told Liam. Mia's text after that night, "I don't regret it, but I'm scared," had been a spark he couldn't extinguish. He hadn't responded, but her words lived in him, a confession and a curse. They'd seen each other since, in group settings, always with Liam's arm around her, his laughter a shield between them. Her eyes would find Nathan's, a fleeting collision that carried the weight of their secret. Her smile, once bold and daring, was softer now, shadowed with something unspoken regret, longing, defiance. Her body, always a masterpiece, was a torment. The way her dresses hugged her curves, the way her hair fell like a curtain, the way her fingers toyed with her necklace, drawing his gaze to the pulse at her throat. Liam's proposal had been the guillotine. Nathan had stood outside Mia's apartment that night, staring at her window, her silhouette a ghost in the light. He hadn't knocked, hadn't spoken, just watched until the light went out, his heart a battlefield of want and shame. The engagement was announced soon after, a whirlwind of celebrations, dinners, toasts, Liam's grin brighter than ever. Nathan was there, playing the role of best friend, his smiles forced, his voice steady, his eyes avoiding Mia's. She wore her ring like a crown, the diamond glinting, but her gaze, when it met his, was a question he couldn't answer. Life moved on, or pretended to. Nathan threw himself into work, his tech firm thriving, his runs longer, his nights sleepless. He dated briefly a kind woman named Sarah with soft eyes and a gentle laugh, but she wasn't Mia. No one was. Mia's presence was a tide, pulling him back no matter how far he swam. He saw her in every woman's walk, every low laugh, every flicker of light on a glass of wine. He hated himself for it, for betraying Liam, for wanting what he couldn't have, but the want was a living thing, clawing at him. Then came the day at the supermarket, a chance encounter that stopped time. Nathan was in the produce aisle, a basket in hand, his navy t-shirt clinging to his shoulders, jeans hugging his thighs. His hair, dark and a little tousled, fell over his brow, and his eyes, deep brown and guarded, scanned the shelves. He felt her before he saw Hera shift in the air, a prickle on his skin. He turned, and there she was, at the end of the aisle, with Liam. Mia was a vision, as always, stealing the breath from his lungs. She wore a cream sweater, soft and fitted, outlining the gentle swell of her breasts, the curve of her waist. Her skirt, a deep navy, hugged her hips, ending mid-thigh, revealing legs that gleamed under the fluorescent lights, long and toned, made for striding into rooms and breaking hearts. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, chestnut waves spilling over one shoulder, a few strands framing her face. Her hazel eyes, flecked with gold, were a storm of emotions surprise, longing, guilted, her lips, unpainted but full, parted slightly, as if she'd forgotten how to breathe. The diamond on her ring finger caught the light, a stark reminder of the life she'd chosen, or been chosen for. Liam was beside her, his arms slung around her shoulders, his grin as bright as ever, He wore a black hoodie and jeans, his broad frame relaxed, his dark eyes sparkling with ease. "Nathan, man!" he called, waving him over, oblivious to the current crackling between them. "Didn't expect to run into you here." Nathan forced a smile, his chest tight, and walked over, his basket heavy in his hand. "Hey," he said, his voice steadier than he felt, his eyes flicking to Mia. She was watching him, her gaze a silent collision, and for a moment, the supermarket faded the hum of shoppers, the beep of scanners, Liam's voice all gone. It was just them, their secret a pulse between them. "Hey, Nathan," she said, her voice a low, smoky caress that wrapped around his name like a memory. The way she said it, soft and deliberate, was a hook in his chest, pulling him back to that night, her body against his, her lips on his skin. "Hey," he managed, his throat dry, and their eyes locked, a single second that stretched into eternity. He saw it all, in her gaze their night, their guilt, the what-ifs that haunted them both. Her body was a siren's call, the sweater clinging to her curves, the skirt outlining her hips, her legs a temptation he couldn't unsee. She was everything he wanted, everything he'd lost, standing there in Liam's embrace. Liam, oblivious, launched into a story about their wedding plans, his hand gesturing, his laugh filling the space. "We're thinking Santa Barbara, maybe next spring," he said, squeezing Mia's shoulder. "You're gonna be my best man, right? No one else I'd want up there." Nathan's stomach twisted, the words a punch he hadn't braced for. "Yeah," he said, his voice hollow, his eyes flicking to Mia. Her smile was tight, her eyes shadowed, and he wondered what she was thinking, what she felt standing there, bound to Liam, tethered to Nathan by a thread neither could cut. "Sounds great," Nathan added, forcing the words, and Liam grinned, clapping his shoulder. Mia's eyes didn't leave Nathan's, and he felt the heat of her, even across the space, the way her sweater hugged her breasts, the way her fingers brushed her hair, the pulse at her throat, he knew by heart. They parted ways, Liam pulling Mia toward the checkout, his arm around her. But as they walked away, Mia glanced back, her eyes meeting Nathan's one last time. It was a look that carried everything a goodbye, a promise, a question. Her lips parted, as if to speak, but she turned away, her hair swaying, her body a silhouette he'd never forget. Nathan stood frozen, the basket heavy in his hand, his heart a storm. He didn't know what they could have been, what they might still be, but that glance was a truth. In another world, another life, they could have been everything. He paid for his groceries, his movements mechanical, and drove home, the city a blur of lights and longing. Later, unpacking his bags, he found something that didn't belong, a folded piece of paper, slipped among the apples, her handwriting unmistakable. His hands trembled as he opened it, the words a whisper from her soul. "If you still have that shirt from that night, don't wash it. Let it hold the scent of our sin." The note was a blade, cutting through the year of distance, the walls he'd built. He went to his closet, pulling out the gray t-shirt he'd worn that night, the one she'd tugged over his head, her nails scraping his skin. He held it to his face, and there it was, faint but undeniable, her scent, jasmine and sandalwood, a ghost of their crime. His knees buckled, and he sank to the floor, the note in one hand, the shirt in the other, his heart torn between guilt and a love he couldn't name. What happened next? Did Nathan keep the shirt, a secret relic of their forbidden night? Did Mia walk down the aisle with Liam, her eyes searching for Nathan in the crowd? Or did their paths cross again, a spark reigniting a fire that never truly died? The answers lie in the shadows, waiting to be told. Stay tuned to my channel for the next chapter of their story, where love and betrayal weave a tale too tangled to unravel. Nathan Tran stood in his apartment, the city humming outside, the note a weight in his hand. Mia Harper was his heart's thief, and he was hers. But in this world, love wasn't a choice, it was a question, unanswered, hanging in the air like the scent of her sin.